Welcome back to my June reading wrap-up. This month I read 6 books, which is an improvement from the 4 I have been reading. It's still not great. I was hoping for closer to double digits, but that's okay. We'll take what we can take. So I'm going to tell you about everything I read in the month of June, so you know whether you want to read it in the month of July. First thing, actually, I'm starting the wrong end. First thing I read in June. I want to give a warning before you pick this one up. This book gets ridiculous, okay? It gets really goofy. It gets goofy. It's a thriller, and I feel like thrillers kind of are on a range from the like more like police procedural type thrillers where it's like a real sort of crime that really could happen in real life. And then you have something more like The Riding Retreat by Julia Bartz, which gets a little like kooky, okay? These things, they're getting a little outlandish. You have to like suspend a disbelief, okay? This book is miles and miles that way. If Riding Retreat is here, it's way over there. Like this book, it gets cuckoo banana crazies. So if that's the kind of thriller you enjoy, I really think you just need to know knowing what to expect in terms of it gets crazy and wild. It is not very realistic. You have to suspend your disbelief like pretty solidly. And if that's not something you want to do, don't read this book. But like it was a ride. Like it did the most unexpected thing at every turn. At every turn. It was crazy. The ending, the last page, crazy. And that book is the last one by Will Dean. The premise, let me tell you the premise, because the premise is what hooked me, because the premise is intriguing, okay? The premise is that this woman, she's like in her late 40s, she's on this cruise with her boyfriend. One morning, like a couple days into the cruise, they're in the middle of the ocean, she wakes up, the cruise ship is empty. That's right, there's no one left on the cruise ship. I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise. I actually haven't, but I've seen a lot of cruise videos. And I've heard of people on a cruise. And I've seen cruise ships. They're huge. There's a lot of people on them. And there were a lot of people when this woman went to bed. But now in the morning, no one's there, including her boyfriend that she was sharing a room with. The cruise ship is completely empty. And she has to figure out, like, what happened to literally everyone else on the cruise ship. And, like, also what is she going to do next? Because, like, I don't know about you, but I don't know how to drive a cruise ship. And neither does she. And she's in, like, the middle of the ocean. It was a wild time, but if that's what if you're looking for a wild time, I like think there's no better option than the last one by Will Dean. The next book I read was Funny Story by Emily Henry. I'm an M. Hen head. I'm the president of the Emily Henry fan club. If we're talking about books, I'm going to bring up Emily Henry. I love her. I've loved her. I've read everything she's ever written, including all of her YA stuff, and Funny Story was brilliant. It's another one where she like kind of like takes, if you've read Book Lovers by Emily Henry, this is another one where she takes like a like Hallmark style rom-com trope and she like spins it on its head. So this is the story of this. We're following Daphne, and Daphne, like weeks before her wedding, I think, gets left by her fiance, who has decided that he's gonna elope with his like childhood best friend. They like are running off together. And so now Daphne not only just got like dumped weeks before her wedding, but also is in this town that she moved to for her fiance, and she doesn't have anywhere to live. She was living in the house that he owned, and now she has nowhere to live. And the only where she can move into is into Miles's house. And Miles is the best friend's roommate, okay? You sort of following me here? And they become roommates. So they've both been left, essentially. Both of them have been left by these partners that have found each other, right? They're like finding each other, running away at the last minute. That's like the Hallmark movie. Their Hallmark movie is going on. Her ex-fiance, Miles. No, Miles is not her ex-fiance. I'm explaining this literally the worst. No one could explain this worse than me. But I loved it. And the best part of this book, is it going to be the best part for you? No, but it was the best part for me. Just kidding. This book is gorgeous, Emily Henry. I assume you're watching. My favorite part, though, was that the whole book is around this event. It like is a countdown to this event, and the event is on my birthday. So the whole book centers around my birthday. The people in the book don't know it's my birthday. They're oblivious to that fact, but I know it's my birthday, and I absolutely love that. I love when things center around me. As a Leo, I love being the center of the universe, especially Emily Henry's universe. What a treat and a treasure. Then I read The Stolen Heir by Holly Black. I read The Cruel Prince maybe 2 years ago, and I read the whole series in a weekend, devoured it, absolutely loved it, thought it was so great, and I have been loving these books as well. I'm like halfway through the second one right now. The Stolen Heir takes place like 10 years, I believe, maybe not quite 10 years, but many years after the Cruel Prince series, and we're following Jude's younger brother, Oak. And we're following kind of like Oak on this adventure, but also this girl named Wren and Oak, okay? Wren was the daughter of the king and queen in the court of Teeth, and they were really mean to her. She had like a really, really rough childhood. We have like a prologue chapter, and as Holly Black likes to do, she likes to literally rip your heart out of your chest. I was crying so hard in the opening because this girl was like raised by a human family, and then her fae parents came to get her, and it was just like traumatizing, crying. But it was really good. I really like Wren as a character. She's really dynamic, and her and Oak go on a little quest together in the first book, and it was so fun. I really love the characters. Holly Black's world building is so fantastic. We're back in the fae world of the Cruel Prince, and it's such an interesting world. In Holly Black's fae, they cannot lie. They like cannot tell a lie, and they cannot touch iron, and like all of those, like the fae are like mean and nasty in a lot of ways, and I just think it's fun and interesting, and like the fae politics are interesting and fun and dynamic. I had a great time. Then I read Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I feel like this book was on everyone's favorite books of the year list last year. It is this like World War II coded fantasy romance that takes place in like just like a slightly more magical world than ours. They're just like gods. It's almost like the way that if you're like familiar with like the Odyssey, like by Homer, how the gods are like directly involved with people's lives in a much more direct way. Like the gods are like walking around doing stuff. That's what's happening here. There are two gods that are at war kind of in the background of this story, and they're like very directly involved. And then there's some like light other magical elements, but it's not like the people themselves are running around doing a lot of magic. And it's following these two rival reporters as they deal with the war and the implications of the war on their lives. But they are also sending letters to each other through like a secret typewriter. And only the boy knows that he's sending letters to the girl. Do you know that from the beginning? I think you do. And then a romance springs up. It is very much historical fiction. It's not historical fiction because this is not a real piece of history, but it reads, I would say, more like historical fiction than it does like fantasy. I was hoping, because this was on everyone's favorites list, I feel like I had really high expectations for it, and I didn't fall in love with it in the way that I had hoped. I still think it's like an incredibly solid story. I think it's very well done. I think it's interesting. I think the world building is like really unique, and I think the characters are brilliant, but I didn't fall in love with it the way I had hoped to. Next, I read Hello Stranger by Katherine Center, and I loved this book. I absolutely loved this book. I know her book The Bodyguard got like a ton of buzz, and I read and enjoyed The Bodyguard, which is why I tried this book. I loved this book more. This book was even better for me. It follows this woman who's a portrait artist, and she winds up getting face blindness, which means that like makes it very difficult to paint portraits. It sounds kind of like a contrived opening to a book, but I thought it was so good. I love it. She has like a dog who's like a prominent character in the novel, and I love Peanut the dog. Katherine Center books are so delightful. I love them so much. They are like closed doors. They're like no spice books, which is, I think, sometimes refreshing. And I just loved it. I really had a great time. One of my favorite rom-coms I've read so far this year. So the last book I read was another thriller that, honestly, I can't recommend in good conscience. I'm like always very hesitant to like disavow a book. Most of the time, if I don't have anything nice to say, I just won't say anything at all. That is because as an author, I like try not to come on here and like say things like truly talk about books that I cannot recommend. Like even if I don't love a book, most of the time I can talk about it in a way where I can recommend it to like, I think most books have readers. Most books have readers, and I feel like I can come on and talk about a book in a way that will make sure that the appropriate readers find the book. The last thing I think any author wants is for like the wrong reader to find their book, right? We want the people who want to read a book to read it. But the last book that I read this month, I can't recommend to anyone in good conscience. I felt like a lot of the contents were harmful, and it just really felt like it was playing right into a lot of narratives around like book bans and what is appropriate for children in these stories, in which like a lot of times right now book bans really overstate the sexual content of books that are like really not inherently sexual. Like it really just felt like it was playing into some really harmful stereotypes around conversation, like how do we have conversations around gender with children, and that really like it spoiled the end for me. So I'm just not going to talk about it. So we're not going to talk about that last book. we're just gonna move on. I hope next month we continue on this upward trajectory. We're like on the way up. Like I said, I'm reading the second book in the Stolen Heir series. The Stolen Heir series by Holly Black this month. I'm like halfway through that. I'm also working on the Little Powerless novella. I'm almost done with that one. I've got some things going. I'm feeling in like a better reading space so far this month, where I'm like wanting to read and not just having to force myself to read, which is good. Which is good. We're on the up and up. Okay. That is all I have for you today. I will see you in the next video. Bye.